your thoughts as leaders in your various industries of how we can make sure young Nigerians have the right skills to take advantage of the fast growth in the creative sector in Nigeria. I'll hand over back to Amanda now. She's not moving. It's been raining this morning, so I think internet is iffy. Amanda, you there? Amanda, can you hear us?
Yes, hi, Rolake. I just had a slight connection issue, but thank you so much. I think you've honestly set the tone for a rich conversation and somehow summarized, just the significance of this incredible sector. So thank you so much for that. So yes, thank you to our CEO, Rolake, who set the tone for today's event. I think moving on to our next agenda item, we actually have a representative from the Mastercard Foundation. So Jobberman is the one part of the partnership, and Mastercard Foundation, the second part of it. And we're going to have Chioma addressing us, and she'll just be speaking about the Young Africa Work Strategy and also the creative sector's potential, right, to grow the Nigerian economy as a whole. So Chioma is on the line. And we'll be sharing the perspective from the Mastercard Foundation with all of us. Once again, thank you everyone for joining. And over to you, Chioma.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And thank you so much, Rolake, for those statistics. As you can see, the creative industry is a very important part of Nigeria's economy. So good morning, everyone. My name is Chioma Waboso. I lead the MSME Finance Program at the Mastercard Foundation. So at the Mastercard Foundation, we have a 10-year strategy called Young Africa Works. The main objective of this strategy is to enable access to dignified and fulfilling work opportunities for 30 million young Africans by 2030. The Mastercard Foundation is currently operational in 8 countries. So each of those countries have their targets towards the 30 million. For us in Nigeria, our target is to enable access to 10 million young Nigerians by 2030. We intend to achieve this target by playing in 3 priority sectors. So agriculture, which makes up 70%, the creative industries, which makes up 20%, and the digital economy, which makes up 10%. So why is the Mastercard Foundation intervening in the creative industry? I mean, if you listen to all the statistics that Rolake mentioned, you will understand that this is a critical sector for Nigeria. It is also a sector that pulls in a lot of young people. It's one of those sectors that has a large percentage of young people being the producers of content and also being consumers of content. So it's important that we upskill them in the different areas that are required to ensure that they can build a professional career within the creative industry or become entrepreneurs that provide service to the creative industry. So how does the foundation intend to work within that industry? So well, we don't claim to know everything about the creative industry. So we have, we're always trying to listen and trying to learn from the different stakeholders that are operational and are working within the industry. So this is the pathway that we are going towards. We want to work with partners that obviously have projects that are scalable, that have projects that are impactful, projects that are catalytic, and projects that can create systemic change within the industry. So if you think about the broad spectrum of the creative industry, starting from maybe film, music, fashion, visual arts, gaming, animation, there's just a lot of opportunities along the value chain of each of those sectors that can create job opportunities for young people. So if you take the film sector, for example, it requires a large number of young people to really produce one movie. So think about the script writer that conceives the idea. You think about the producer, the directors, the actors, the actresses, the costume designer, the makeup artists, the sound engineer, the lighting, the props. every single person that works into creating a movie has a specific skill. So it's important to continue upskilling more young Nigerians so they can have that skill to really build a career within the industry. I'm really excited about this roundtable that Jobberman has organized. I mean, Jobberman has a very successful history of preparing young people for the future of work in Nigeria. So, this roundtable would also present opportunities to really hear more about the great impact that the creative industry has to play in Nigeria. We know that the creative industry was one of the sectors that were massively affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's also important to hear how has that effect affected the opportunities within the creative industry? What kind of new innovation models are available, and how do we really move the sector forward? It's very important to monetize this sector and create opportunities for monetization. It's important to democratize access to learning for the different types of young people in Nigeria. So, young people in Nigeria can be classified as, youth in the university, youth in work, but you also have young people that are on the peripherals. So the vulnerable youth population, youth in low-income communities, youth with disabilities, youth that are internally displaced. So we need to ensure that we have opportunities for every segment of these young people so that they can learn the skills that are required within the creative industry that will enable them prosper within their chosen field. So I really thank everyone for coming out for this conversation, and I look forward to learning as much as I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chioma. And I guess so encouraging, right, to hear from Mastercard your perspective, but also just the support, right, and all you have put behind ensuring that this sector does indeed thrive. So thank you so much for that. I know I briefly had connection issues just before you spoke, Chioma, but just to ensure that everybody has an idea of who you are, I'll just briefly share a bit about you before we move on to our next agenda item. So thank you once again, Chioma. Just a brief summary of Chioma. Chioma has over 10 years of experience working in the field of international development with a strong focus on finance and private sector development. And in her role as the program lead MSME finance at the Mastercard Foundation, which in the office based in Lagos. So Chioma is actually here with us in Lagos. Alongside with financial institutions, her focus is mainly on increasing access to finance for MSMEs, and she's also leading the engagement within the creative industries. So hence, sharing her insights from that perspective. Chioma has a rich background within the financial sector, from working at the IFC to leading private partnership programs with the German Development Corporation, GIZ, on a number of different projects. And she also is a fellow of the global chartered body ACCA. Holds an MBA in international business and has 2 bachelor's degrees focused on accounting and IT. So just so we know a bit more about the person who just spoke to us and just the work that she's doing from finance to the creative sector. Thank you, Chioma. We sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you, Amanda. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So that brings us to our next agenda item. So in terms of our next agenda item, a key part, as you all know, the name of the roundtable is fostering growth within the creative sector and bridging the skills gap. And this is premised on, so this is premised on the fact that, we worked with the Mastercard Foundation, and we essentially have worked on a skills gap report focused on the creative sector. And the purpose of this report is to actually understand the labor market realities of the creative sector. From the employer perspective, understanding what are the skills that are required by employers for candidates and for the success of the sector. And from the job seeker perspective, understanding, what are the skills that they possess and how they rate their level of proficiency within those skills, from advanced to being an expert, and then bringing that together to establish where we see the skills gap and what that means in terms of recommendations for interventions. So our M&E monitoring and evaluation lead Olufemi Balogun led this effort. And for us, this he's captured in a report which will be shared with all of you after the event. However, we thought it was important to share the key highlights from the report. So Femi will actually be sharing the slides, which summarize key aspects of this report. However, given that this is the creative sector roundtable, we thought we wouldn't be doing justice to the creative sector if we didn't have a short video documentary capturing those insights, but also perspectives from key industry leaders, such as Bolande Austin Peters, Sam, who is actually on the line and will be part of our panel discussion, and other esteemed guests. So we will be sharing that with everyone afterwards. Given the length of it, we thought it best to share it afterwards and for everyone to consume it in their own time. But for now, I'll hand over to Olufemi Balogun, who's our monitoring and evaluation lead at Jobberman, to share the insights from the Skills Gap Report and Creative Sector Report. Femi, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Femi. Looking forward to your insights you'll be sharing. Over to you.
Everyone, I acknowledge of government representatives here, private sector leaders, the Mastercard Foundation, creatives and distinguished colleagues. My name is Femi Balogun. I am the lead researcher, or I lead research here at Jobberman. And in the last 3 or so months, we've been working on a study to try and understand the creative sector from a perspective of skills. And this research essentially forms part of our baseline to understand, where the gaps are and how we can then plug in interventions or policy to bridge this gap essentially. So I'll just sharing briefly some of the things that we found. I'll begin with, an overview and introducing the theoretical the theoretical framework that underpins, how we're able to approach the work, and then just discuss some of the findings and then highlight some recommendations we have made in the report. So let me begin by saying that Nigeria's creative sector holds tremendous potential to unlock the country's economy and provide increased employment opportunities for young people. The projections are promising. The sector is expected to be worth over $6 billion by 2021. At the same time, Wizkid and Burna Boy's recent wins at the Grammy is indicative of this potential. But I dare say that there is a prosperity narrative about Nigeria's creative sector that is yet to be written. For one, young people have been described as yet COVID-19 has exposed the digital divide that exists amongst the country's youth population. A lot of this is rooted in poverty and the gaps in the educational system, but it's also compounded by challenges of informality, a derogatory mindset about about the creative sector, and so because of all of this, it makes it difficult to contemplate the opportunities inherent in the sector. Really, in general, the issues such as informality, like I mentioned earlier, lack of essential skills, insufficient funding, a backlog of analog reality, have continued having far-reaching consequences for the prosperity of the sector. And so writing a prosperity narrative for Nigeria's creative sector will require that all these distortions be addressed. We clearly have to move forward, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with being optimistic. However, that optimism comes with a responsibility. And so the creative sector currently exists in what I've called a time warp, using Tunji Lardner's theory of Nigerian history. It's we are living in, or the creative sector, exists in a time of where we have to simultaneously, deal with the problems of the past, a compounding as we contemplate the future. And if you look at some of these issues of the past that I've mentioned, there's informality, there's the analog reality, there's a skills gap, there's also gender, and then in the present, we are blessed with the opportunity that urbanization brings and the increasing youth population. There is the increase in mobile penetration, digitization, and the trends that the fourth industrial revolution, is bringing force that world. Also, we're seeing improvement in the way we are doing business. But at the same time, if you flip these opportunities, you would also see that they present their own unique challenges. How do you want to create jobs for over 100 million young people below age 35? And by by 2030, it's expected that this number will have more than doubled. Yes, mobile penetration, there's internet penetration, but how much of Nigerians or how much of our young people have access to a mobile phone or internet? And COVID also has its own challenges, like Chioma had mentioned, right? So despite that optimism, we have to deal with the problems of the past, a compounding of opportunities and challenges of the present as we contemplate the future. The biggest question really is, are we ready for the prosperity ahead? So first, let's deep dive into the structure of the creative sector. Our estimates suggest that the creative sector currently employs about 4.2 million people across five industries. Please let me know when you stop hearing me, Amanda, just in case technology misbehaves. Right. So across five, industries, and we looked at media, we looked at entertainment, we looked at beauty and lifestyle, we looked at visual art, as well as tourism and hospitality. And the trend is that more of currently these jobs are more in beauty and lifestyle. And I mean the reason is not far-fetched. If you go into any street corner or major markets in cities around Nigeria, whether it's Lagos, Enugu, Kano, or Kaduna, you will find this beauty and lifestyle engagements all around you, whether from tailors to makeup artists and what have you. And so there's a tendency that the creative sector can provide another 2.7 million jobs within the next 4 or 5 years. And our estimates indicate that more of this will come from also beauty and lifestyle, but at the same time visual art, because of some of the trends that we are seeing. Well, someone might want to ask, where would these jobs come from? They will be from highly specialized roles, such as video animation. There'll be generally project managers, lawyers, and accountants. There'll be tech creative roles, such as there'll be tech, creative roles, such as digital marketing and the sales of the NFTs, and also creative enabled jobs such as guides and just to mention a few. But in terms of contribution to GDP, like Rolake was already talking about it earlier, the entire industry is set to contribute about 5 trillion naira to Nigeria's GDP, and this was in 2016, and this shows significant promise. And not only that, according to the United Nations, Nigeria's film and movie industry is said to be the second largest in the world after India. After India, in terms of film film production. Yes, expected to had an additional 13.4% of growth by the end of the year, according to PwC. These numbers are essentially being shaped by some of the factors I mentioned earlier. And while this, while these opportunities, suggest, positives, they also have, their implications, like urbanization, population, fourth industrial revolution, COVID, the expanding digitization and mobile penetration, and improved, business environment. I mean, if I want to dwell on expanding digitization and mobile penetration for a little, that number is increasing, significantly. And from what we found, we were seeing that young people, there's very low barriers to entry, if you want to become a creative. We're seeing how COVID has moved a lot of creatives into social media, whether as comedians, online comedians, or whether, trading in textile items and what have you. So there's that opportunity, but at the same time, that penetration is in just specific locations. So there's a challenge of, internet infrastructure. If I'm going to talk about the downsides of this opportunity. And so the key challenge is how do we understand, this opportunity, and where do these skills, the skills gap lie, and that was the focus of what we tried to do in the research. So media, entertainment, tourism, hospitality, visual arts and work, and then lifestyle and beauty, and this have subsets. So given this, these sectors, we engaged a total of about 3,400 unique job seekers who are interested in the creative sector, and then we also talked to over 1,900 employees within the sector, Lagos, Kano, and trying to understand the skills gap, and from our findings and engagement with job seekers and employers, these are some of the things we found. In media, we found skills gap in cinematography and videography, as well as project management. In entertainment, we found gaps in marketing and acting. In tourism and hospitality, there are gaps in customer service, and everybody we talked to in tourism sector, really emphasize the issue around customer service, and tracing some of these issues, this skills gap to culture as well. There's also in the visual art industry, there are gaps in graphic design and also photography. And then in beauty and lifestyle, there are gaps in hairdressing and sewing. And then what we also try to do in terms of ID is also highlight some of the demand gaps, and then we also try to put a scale to these gaps. And top of them is project management and marketing. Many of the employers we talk to, most of them mention the fact that job readiness amongst very low, and across the industry, the 5 industries, employers say that there is some of the skills I've mentioned just now are we also try to look at the gaps, not just in the technical area, but also in the area of skills gap, because a trend that we are finding more and more. I haven't done the digital sector study, and now doing that of the creative. We're seeing that employers are now beginning to emphasize on the balance between technical skills as well as soft skills. And you see there's this this circle of digital skills which dwells within the technical and soft skills. And so, and also the privilege of the work that we are doing allowed us to engage over 34,000 unique applications. Baseline, we're able to ask some of these job seekers across 7 soft skills competencies. And like you see, the gaps are in communication skills, innovativeness, emotional intelligence, and problem solving. And this resonates with a number of the employers that we engaged. Part of what is not even here is some of them mentioned challenges around leadership and taking initiative. And then some call it a deeper artistic sense to work, really. But on the average, we see that we found that the score across the 4,000 young people is about 48%, which is people. So it just shows that there's so much needs to be done when it comes to the skills gap, whether it's technical, digital, or soft skills. What we also try to do is to understand how COVID has affected job seekers, particularly in the area of job creation, so to say. And one of the questions we asked them is if they're likely to lay off staff. And more than 30% of the employers we spoke with, said in categorical terms that they were not likely to, they are not and not likely to lay off staff. And this speaks to the innovation that is already ongoing. Despite COVID, COVID came and hit the sector really hard, especially the tourism and hospitality sector. Perhaps the biggest gainers is, the gaming industry, right? But COVID, from employers' perspective, has helped many of the creative businesses to expand and diversify their offerings. They're innovating and taking disruptive measures to remain relevant and also sustain growth. And they're also rethinking partnerships and looking for new hires with specific skills. And they also talk about how the pandemic has affected their business, and more of them talked about cash flow, sales, and just very few of them talked about salary and wages, which just speaks to the tendency of stability that the sector currently has. Because of time, let me just quickly go into some of the way we are thinking about recommendations, right? And so reimagining the future of the creative sector will require substantial investment in skills development, essentially. We would also need to prioritize, regulation. We need to improve more supporting with funding and an enabling business environment that supports innovation. Invest through inclusion of soft skills and digital skills in our curriculum is a conversation that we must, continue to have. Whatever curriculum in country moves, and if we are going to take advantage of the opportunity that urbanization and the increasing youth population presents, then we have to do something about how young people are being socialized into the world of work, more broadly. We're also finding that, the creative sector actually, creates more opportunities, work opportunities for women. I can best describe it is anybody can wake up in the morning and just decide to put something on Instagram, on YouTube, and then you become a big earner, and we're seeing, a poster a sample example of this is Tauma, for instance, you know, who just all of a sudden went on Instagram, started doing skits, and you know, she's all over the place now and making a lot of money, and also creating employment out of all of this. And so this is a kind of opportunity because of, you know, the flexibility it provides, as well as the limited, you know, barrier to entry it provides. And so women are finding, if you walk into any corner, you know, you'll find, you know, women in fashion, you will find women in, you know, beauty, you'll find women in the hospitality and tourism sectors, you know. And so you know, gender-focused policy that supports, that prioritizes women's interests and their needs is something that we must begin to emphasize. You know, this is because and we also need to think about ways to, you know, work around the conditions that make work vulnerable and volatile for women within the creative sector. I think there's also the issue of the structure around creative sector is something that might be very helpful, so that, you know, there's a structure around wage, because, you know, I can't wake up in the morning and say I want to start a bank or I want to start a hospital, but I can wake up in the morning and say I want to be a comedian, I want to be, you know, tailor and all of that. And so that in itself creates, you know, or, you know, size the need, why we need to put a structure around it, because pay is not, you know, structured. And then also for government will need to, you know, allow for infrastructure, internet, for instance, to continue to, you know, reach, you know, both urban and rural areas, you know, across the country, and also enable an environment where innovation can thrive. So these are some of the ways we're thinking about what government can do, what development partners can do, and what private sector can do to galvanize or to, you know, prepare us for that unwritten future, and so that we can write a positive narrative of prosperity for the creative sector. Yeah, and so I think this has come to this day of my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions if there are reflections or comments.
All right, thank you so much, Femi, and thank you for sharing those insights with all of us. I think this is, you know, just testament to the significance of this sector and the potential that lies in there. However, it also touches on some of the key enablers and challenges that need to be overcome to fully enjoy the benefits, right, of this specific sector. So thank you, Femi, for sharing those insights. I think, you know, from hearing about the size of the sector, the 5 trillion contribution to GDP, to the potential number of jobs, you know, that we see being created here. I think this is the perfect foundation to start or have the conversation that we're having today. So thank you, Femi, for that. Before I go into the next session, because I imagine there may be some questions from various individuals who would like to ask Femi questions. And I think, you know, some of our esteemed guest experts and key industry leaders can also weigh in where necessary. Just before I do that, I think you may have noticed that we have a number of Sheilas on our guest list. And it seems that Zoom has renamed most people to Sheila or to Toby. If you received an invite to Google link, we kindly ask you to rename yourself to your actual name by clicking on the top right corner over the image on the screen. We apologize about this technical glitch. So no, it is not you seeing many Sheilas. This is just technology and it, I guess, showing its autonomy in this instance. All right, so I see some questions are starting to be dropped in the chat. But I will hand over to my colleague, Nike. Nike is actually the consulting lead at Jobberman Nigeria, and she will be taking us through our questions and answer session. And then she will also be sharing a few poll questions. We just wanted to just get a sense of a few things from the audience, so you'll easily be able to respond and click on the screen. I think someone was going to speak. Okay. All right.
I'm seeing some questions. I'm seeing some questions in the comment box.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Now, Femi?
Please do continue dropping your questions. Over to you, Nike, to take us through this part. I think this is where we can engage with the meaty content that has been shared with us by Femi.
Yes. So Femi, do you want to take some of those questions now, or do you want us to take it after the polls? So that some people can drop some more questions and yeah?
Nike, I think you can take the first two questions and you can intersperse it with the polls. So since we have the two there, we can start. Yeah.
Okay, so Femi, please help us with the answers. So we have a question here that says there seems to be an inadequate protection for creative work. How do we improve this? And what have we seen that can work? So here he wants to maybe legal contract copyrights, or how can we get an affordable protection? Femi, over to you. Do you want to take that question?
Yeah, I mean, this is partly the challenge around informality, and although we have regulators, we have COSON, for instance, that helps with copyright. There's a challenge with implementation, and there's also the challenge of awareness. Many people who are coming into the industry are not, fully briefed around who the regulators are, what you need to do. And, in the past, we've had situations where we see these things, on our TV screens and in the tabloids, where, artists are, leaving each other, an artist is leaving a producer. And this is largely, because of the knowledge around the limited knowledge around, contracting within the sector and copyright. I think we need to create more awareness, and then perhaps this sits with government. But I think that also players within the industry would need to continue to work together to sensitize each other, and then with this, there's a need to actually also think about or continue to have conversations around, putting a structure around the sector, so that when we are having new entrants, they are aware of the do's and don'ts, and it can help them so that they are adequately protected. I hope that helps to answer in answering your question.
Yes, it does, Femi. Nike, if I can just step in, I was going to say we also have one of our moderators, or rather one of our panelists, Isioma, who's head media and entertainment intellectual property law at Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors. I don't know, Isioma, if you want to weigh in here, and if she's already on the line. I know our panel discussion will be the next one, but I thought maybe she could weigh in here as a lawyer, and that's exactly why we brought her onto here. That is a key issue within the creative sector, that observing of legal law and protection, right, of creators' rights. So Isioma, if you are here, it would be great to hear from you. If not, happy for you to weigh in on this later. But Femi, thank you so much. Okay, just looking at the list. Okay, Isioma may not be here as yet, but I think we can note that for her to continue speaking on later on. But back to you, Femi and Nike, for the next question.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Thanks, Tunde Ido Adegoke, for your question. I know we have one more from Aurelia. Femi, could you repeat whose theory of Nigerian history you were referencing in discussion of the current time work?
Oh yes, that's Tunji Ladner. Tunji Ladner, I stumbled on his TED talk, and he was describing Nigeria's history and how we are living in three eras at the same time. The past, the present, and the future. And he was asking, how do we negotiate the problems of the past, the compounding of opportunities and challenges in the present as we contemplate the future. I think he calls it the time the time, it calls it a time challenge. Yeah, but his name is Tunji Ladner. You can just check the YouTube video TED Talk, and I can share the paper later on with you if I can get your email address. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Femi. I just wanted to add that if you do have questions that are specific to an industry, during the breakout session, you can ask your questions as well. It's a smaller room. There are people focused on those particular sectors, and you can ask your relevant questions. Before we ask Femi more questions and anyone else in the room, I just want to share with us our polls. These polls are just to test within the room some of the things we already tested across board with young people in Nigeria, and just get a feel of what we think in the room and what kind of people we have here in terms of work. So I will launch the polls now, and I'll give us a few minutes to fill that out. Yes, so we can start polling now. You can vote, let us know where you are and what you think about some of the issues that we've put in here, and then we can take a couple more questions. So let me know if you can see the polls and you can start voting. Yeah, I can see voting has started. So while we're polling, Femi, the next question is from Lois. Whose responsibilities is it to provide information that the artist needs as you described? So I think this is a follow-up question on regulation and legal issues. Please, what is the current status of the legal issues COSON was having, and with the NCC suspension of their license, and how does that affect the sector? Femi, you can take this one, but I also think if there's anyone in the industry, media and entertainment industry with music, you can please unmute yourself and let us know, and you can take this question as well. I know we have people from Being Creative and Chocolate City here who can also weigh in here. Giving the polls a few more minutes.
All right. So Nika, let me just respond to Lewis's question. Thank you for your question, Lewis. I think because of the challenge of informality and the lack of structure within the creative sector, largely, it might be very difficult to place a responsibility on a particular institution or group of people. But my solution would be that we might actually need an integrated approach to this, because this is just one part of a broader challenge, and I think that's one of the things that this roundtable can do. How can how can players within this within the creative sector work with government, work with private sector and other enablers to ensure that this word goes out? How do we even also work with educational institutions or institutions that are involved with skills development within the creative sector? How can all of these stakeholders play a role in putting that word out? I think this is perhaps the biggest question, and I think that for me that would be the solution. In terms of the quagmire between COSON and NCC, it's not something I've been following, but I think that if the issues, if COSON is having issues, then it speaks to the broader challenge around, again, informality, and how politics is also playing a role in the challenges that we are seeing within this industry. But I'm happy for industry players here to also weigh in on this. I hope that helps with your question, Louis.
Thank you, Femi. I can see some more questions, but while we're doing that, can people please vote in the polls? I see some people are already voting, but I know we have a lot of people here and I want to hear from as many people as possible. I want your views to be shared so that we can have a discussion around it if the results. We have a question from Temi Tope in the chat as well. Are there any plans to establish more institutions for proving capacity development for actors in the creative sector? I think this will really help them build capacity as well as systems and structures for the sector. Okay, this is a question and a suggestion. Thank you, Temi Tope.
Interesting question, Richard Banji. Thanks for this question. I think you're absolutely right, and I think that some actors are already beginning to provide support, in terms of capacity development. I know that, for instance, the development partner British Council is doing some work in terms of helping creatives, particularly those in arts, and I think Wave Academy, I'm not mistaken, I think Wave Academy is also playing a role in terms of skills development and the likes. I think if we have more of this and, some of the other and hubs around these kind of things, I think it will help. I know that BES also has an academy, and if more actors, continue to do this to help. AY also has, they have this, upcoming comedy shows. And if, across the industry, across the sector, if, we have more of this coming up and, we put a structure around it, I think it will really help the sector. So I think you're very right, Richard Banji. Thank you for your question.
Femi, if I can also just weigh in here, I think, I guess one of the people we actually interviewed in the video, Melania Austin Peters, founder of Terra Culture, is also, we're starting to see people who are experts in the field and now saying, hey, how do we start sharing this knowledge with other people? So seeing individuals like her also starting to establish academies such as these. So there it would be focusing on skills such as lighting, makeup artists, going into your more technical production, etc. I think you're also seeing entities such as, various entities also having interest in how do we establish this kind of curriculum. We've had conversations, with some entities saying that, how do we channel the work that we're doing into that? And I think also bringing it closer to home. Jobberman soft skills training, right, is focusing on the soft skills aspect of things, and having spoken to entities such as Trace TV, Terra Culture, etc., and seeing the interest there in the soft skills training to build the capacity of young people. For us, it has been focused on virtually delivering that training, but this has been identified as a gap. And I think it's part of the capacity development work that we're speaking about here. So I think these are some of the ways that different entities are coming together to build the capacity of young people within the sector.
Yes, thank you, Amanda, for that. I think to your point, Amanda, what we find is when people do come to the sector and they do succeed, whatever sector they are playing in, they try to open up the opportunities to as many young people to be trained to play within that sector. And we find that in the work that our partners are doing, training young people and letting them enhance that training with our soft skills training. So I'm going to share the results for the poll now. And if there are no more questions, we can finish this segment and move on quickly to the next one. I see some people are still voting. I will just give 1 more minute and then share results. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay.
Nika, there's a question here from Nafiasu Yusuf.
I see that.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Femi. Just curious, and perhaps I missed some of the issues identified, but beyond pay gap issues that need to be streamlined, where there's some specific gender gaps identified in the sector. I think that, I think that largely we are seeing that, based on the 5 industries we looked at, there's a tendency for women to play in specific, sectors. And we are seeing more women playing in the beauty and lifestyle sector, as well as tourism and hospitality. But when you come to media and entertainment, you'll find women there, but they are playing a bit of back end or administrative roles, so to say. But you won't find them in the technical part of the work, of jobs within that space. Also, I would say that there are women all across the 5 industries, but when you now look at who is playing at more senior levels, you will find less and less women there. But I think that there are notable women who have smashing the glass ceiling. Funke Akindele, for instance, is one good example here. And yeah, that that comes to my mind. And there's Genevieve as well, who recently opened up Netflix to Nigeria, or should I say Africa. I think these are women who are doing great things within the sector. So, but I think that largely there are opportunities for women within the sector. But I think that we would need to just pay a bit of more attention to ensure that we have policies that support women to grow and to also develop technical skills within the creative sector. I hope that helps with your question. What do you, Nika?
Thank you. Thank you all for your questions and your contributions. As we go on, you would engage more with the conversation. We're going to have a panel, which is next. And we're also going to have a breakout sessions where you can fully immerse yourself in the conversation, contribute to the conversations that are going to be happening there. Now I'll hand over back to Amanda to take us into the rest of the program.
Thank you, Nike. I see there was a request for contact at the Mastercard Foundation that people can speak to for those who want to set up capacity development institutions for the creative sector. I think for that, we do have Chioma from the Mastercard Foundation on the line, and Nonye, so I'm happy to engage them afterwards and possibly share those details with individuals who do want those details after speaking to them and obviously getting the go-ahead with you. But yes, thank you, Nike. And I think there was a question around Bez the singer. Yes, Femi was referring to Bez the singer to respond to this question. I think we will continue taking the rest of the questions as we go on. And then, okay, noted, Deji, just seeing the comments coming up here. I think there's one or two other questions, but just being mindful of time. We just want to make sure we go into the panel discussion. Can everyone hear me clearly? Just to check.
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic.
Loud and clear, Amanda.
Great. So just to take a pulse check, everyone. I know we obviously started just after 10, waiting for everyone to come in. We started at 10 on the dot, but we gave people a few minutes. But I hope everyone is still with us, still engaged, and do continue dropping your questions on in the chat box. And then also during the breakout sessions that will be happening later, it'll also be a smaller space where you can ask some of the experts and industry leaders who are here with us today. So speaking about industry leaders and getting the perspective from individuals in the sector, we'll now also be shifting to our panel discussion. This is being moderated by Audu Maikori. He is the CEO of Chocolate City. Just, I guess, a bit about Audu before he engages the panel, our panelists for the day. He's a multi-award winning entrepreneur, lawyer, and industry consultant. He's actually better known as the founder of Chocolate City Group, a media and entertainment company which includes Chocolate City Music, a record label of one of the biggest record labels in Africa, and which is home to some of Africa's artists such as Femi Kuti, M.I. Abanga, Dice Allies, Black Bones, etc. Born and bred in Kaduna, he is an alumnus of King's College, Lagos University of Jos, Pan-African University, Lagos MIT, Sloan School of Management in Boston, respectively. So he will be moderating our panel discussion and he will introduce our panelists. I think a lot of their names will be familiar to most of you, given their contribution to the sector thus far. So looking forward to an engaging discussion. Thank you so much, Audu.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from this part of the world, and it's a pleasure to be on this, platform. I've always been a huge supporter and fan of what the creative economy and what that could do for people around the world, and I'm so excited about the conversations today. So we have a fantastic panel. Now, one of the problems that we have is that we have so many Sheila OJs, so maybe we should recognize Sheila as a special guest of honor. But seriously speaking,
I fully agree, Audu.
Yeah, but so may I start by introducing Miss ladies first always. So we'll start off by introducing Miss Omoyemi Akerele. Are you here? So I will just read her bio really quickly. She's the founder and executive director of Style House Files, a fashion business development agency, which focuses on Nigerian African fashion. She launched the Lagos Fashion and Design Week, a pioneer fashion platform driving the African fashion industry. Beyond the runway, the annual event provides a physical platform that is gradually positioning, or shall I say repositioning, fashion as a useful tool for the commerce and creativity in Nigeria. So put your hands together virtually, or you can just put up your logo for Miss Akerele. The second person I'll be introducing is another lady. Her name is Miss Uche Cynthia. I like to call her my Oga at the top. She's the Assistant General Manager of and Group Head of the Creative Industry in the Bank of Industry. Is Miss Cynthia here?
Well, I'm representing him. Good morning, Mr. Makori. Good morning, everybody. I'm representing her here. This is Promise Ikechukwu George.
Oh, hi, Promise. Really good to have you. But
Thank you.
I'm a strict adherent to chivalry, so I was going for the ladies first. But thank you very much. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
And third is Miss Ojoma Ochai. She's the Regional Director for the Arts and Creative Economy Program for the British Council on Sub-Saharan Africa. Please put your hands together for her. Her work here is quite endless. She's worked with UNESCO, worked with a bunch of projects around the creative economy, and currently, like I said, is the Regional Director for Arts and Creative Economy. She's been nominated for several awards, including Young Person of the Year, Future Awards. She's a fellow of the DeVos Institute of Arts Management, University of Maryland, and also an associate fellow of the Nigerian Leadership Institute. Ojoma, welcome. Now going forward, also want to introduce another sterling member of the panel, Mr. Ferdinand Adi-Mefe. He is a creative entrepreneur and the founder of the CEO of Magic Carpet Studios, an innovation storytelling company that specializes in developing authentic African stories in the global market. Ferdinand, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm here.
Okay. So I mean, if you don't mind, could you put your camera so we can see you? And last but not least, in any way, my chairman, board of directors, Sam, who is the MD Trace West Africa. forget how he looks. He's been in the industry for a long time and has done loads of great things. But primarily started his career and worked at several times with MTV Network, Cadbury, Coca-Cola, you just name it, he's been around. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the panel, and this is going to be exciting. So let me kind of set the rules for the panel. We barely have 20 minutes for the panel, so it's a bit tight. So we need to move quite rapidly. But what we're going to do is that I'm going to go around and I'll start off with Ojoma. And we'll try and keep our answers to about 3 minutes. I know it's going to be tough because they're really robust questions themselves, but we'll have time to break down the details during the breakout session. So, Ms. Ochai, the Chinese and Indian economies, while large manufacturing hubs, are predicted to move from industrial to service-based economies. Just like the likes of the UK and other European countries, this is expected to happen in the next 20 to 30 years. What do you think it would take for Nigeria to fill that manufacturing gap and demand?
Thanks for that question, Aldo, and hi, everyone. So, not to be problematic, but I think that question is a bit problematic. Why do we want to fill a manufacturing gap when everybody is moving to the service industry? It's my first sort of question back to that question. And then my second question is, on what basis do we want to fill a manufacturing gap when our current sort of competitive advantage is in the services industry? So if you look at the things that are creating alternative pathways for young people at the moment, if you look at the sections of the economy that have grown the fastest in Nigeria in the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, it's in the service economy. So I would argue that even though those two things are not mutually exclusive, growing manufacturing and growing services, I would argue that what we want to grow is in fact our services industry, on the basis that if you look at telecoms, if you look at technology, if you look at the creative economy, those are the areas where we know that in spite of the context in which people have to work, those sectors are growing in Nigeria, in spite of the crippling electricity situation, in spite of the crippling logistics and supply situation. Those sectors have grown, and that they've created a sort of new class of middle class. They've created a new class of wealth. So I would say that the sort of solution, the future for Nigeria, I would argue, it's not manufacturing, is in how do we capitalize on the services industry where we already have a competitive advantage, where the market is growing exponentially, where our young people, because of their digital awareness, because of their digital capability, are already poised to benefit from. As I said, it's not mutually exclusive. So I'm not saying don't do manufacturing, but I would say what we want to spend the next 20, 30 years doing is consolidating our place in terms of the global service economy, and then looking for entry points for manufacturing.
Well, some proponents might argue otherwise, but I'll come back to that when we have a bit more time. But points very well made. So let me speak to Ms. Akirile. This question goes to you. The Jobberman report says that beauty and lifestyle, including fashion, has the highest potential to create jobs by 2025. Where do the opportunities for job creation really lie? What potential enablers need to be in place for the prediction to hold true and even be exceeded? Oh, is she here? Is Yemi here? No. Okay. If she isn't, then I'll just move on to the next person. But I thought she was actually. All right, Sam. The report says that job readiness is very low in the creative sector, especially in areas such as cinematography. It would seem that the industry players such as Trace TV and Co. have to find a way to meet the shortage in supply. What's the solution? And also, have you seen this work in other West African countries? Sam.
Thanks, Aldo. Hi, guys. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Are we? All right. Thanks, Audu. Hi, everybody. No, very pertinent question. And for Trace, it's a specific pain point. We're currently about to roll out new studios in about 8 African countries. And what we find is that there's I'm giving a very recent example because it's so evident currently. And what we find is that even our production heads and the guys who are filming, their skill level and their education level is only to a certain point, right? So while we're bringing in, and setting up additional studios, actually it's just as important, if not more important, to even increase the skill set of the guys working at Trace. And so a lot of people would consider, the cinematography guys, the production, the editors at Trace to be highly skilled guys. But what we really find is that 99% of people on the continent, making content, whether it's camera work, editing, motion graphics, etc., are self-taught, right? And while they've done incredible things, the opportunity for development and for improved quality of output, for improved storytelling, for much more powerful content ultimately. And content is such a powerful medium in every sphere of life, that space remains. So I think I have seen I haven't necessarily seen a specific model in any other African countries. I'd point to and say, what I will say is that the entertainment industry in general, and specifically to content development, is one of those things where the creative spirit alone is fueling it right now, right? And out of that, a confluence of funding, innovative training, letting people understand what tools are out there and how to use those tools best is but I think it takes all partners within the value chain. We're not overall, one of the major challenges for the creative industry, and Audu, this is the sheer size of the industry, right? It's massive in terms of output, in terms of people involved, but the revenues and the money is not at some incredible scale that we can that everybody can thrive off of. But as more comes into the industry, as more youth and creative energy is coming into the industry, the rest of us, whether it's Mastercard, Jobberman, ourselves at Trace, play an important role in investing specifically in skill development, across multiple sectors. So I hope that's a good general answer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thanks, Sam. And just to say that, just recently as well, a colleague of mine alluded to this, because it would seem that the amount that streaming platforms such as Netflix and co are paying Nigeria per season is what they pay other people per episode. It would seem, and I think one of the arguments around this is just the fact that the quality,
exactly,
the quality of work that we're doing is not quite up to par, as they say. So there's no doubt there's a huge skills development gap that needs to be filled.
Yes, and I hate to. I know we've got limited time, and I don't want to jump into anybody's space, but I want to make a point about that. Exactly to that point. Literally, Netflix, like you said, is paying, and Mnet and other players in the market, including airlines and so on, are paying African and Nigerian producers a lot less than they do in multiple other regions. And that's because the supply isn't there. The supply and the quality isn't there. To get more specific about what's happening with us, we're bringing in a whole load of content, and the teams, as I hear many people say out there, we're saying we need the best camera, we need a red camera, or we need which is actually a cinematic camera. And really, with an SLR, and also with an iPhone or a good smartphone, you with the right settings and the right understanding of your equipment, the right training, you can actually bring up the quality of what we're doing incredibly and increase the value.
All right, thanks, Sam. So I'll move right quickly to Promise. And Promise, apologies again for the mix-up with the name. What sort of support did BOI provide for businesses during the pandemic? And what is the methodology for disbursing the 300 million Naira loan? And how can creatives benefit from this?
All right. Thank you very much for that question, and then thank you for having us. All right. I also appreciate the organizers of this event for putting this together.
So, Promise, can you put on your camera because we can't see you?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
It's on now. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having us. All right. Let me start with the support. This is support the BOI actually granted the customers, during the lockdown. Actually, I want to talk proudly about that because we did a whole lot. Of course, as a development bank, what stands as our priority is our customer first. And that's why what we did was a combination of palliatives. All right. What I meant by combination of palliative is that we looked at some restructuring parameters that have to do with maybe extension of moratorium. All right. Of course, we understand what moratorium is all about. But there are people who were caught up in the web of the lockdown who had not actually started their business. And even those who were actually doing business needed some time off because of the lockdown to be able to actually to reactivate, back to stream. Because they were all caught up in the web of the lockdown, they needed, some breather to be able to stabilize. So what we did actually was to actually grant them, extended moratorium. And not only that, we also looked at what I call principal deferment. Because at that time too, there are some customers too whose principal was just falling due, all right? So it would be unfair for you to ask them to start paying at that point in time. So what we did was to say, okay, you know what? Extend your principal, repayment, maybe by 12 months or thereabout. Even some asked for 2 years, and we had to grant them because it was an emergency period. And not only that too, what we also did was also to defer, to reduce interest rates, from 10% to 8%. All right, we did that for a period of 1 year. It got expired, April 2021, which we have extended to April 2022. So right now, most of our projects are on 8% interest rate. And not only that, there's this special fund called the CBN Industrial Fund, right? What we did before the pandemic, they were actually, paying 8% interest rate. So what we did at that time was to bring it down to 5%, okay, during the palliative. So right now they're on 5%. Actually, like I mentioned, the 5% was supposed to end in April 2021, but we have extended the same, concession, to April 2022. So as we speak, yes, some have not been able to recuperate from the effect of the lockdown. So what we are doing is on a case-by-case basis, in the sense that, for those who are still coming back to us to say, please, the 2 years or the 1 year is not sufficient, please help us extend. We're still doing it because we understand that, of course, the effect is going to last for a while. So we have to be open-minded in that regard. So these are the palliative we actually granted our customers, as a result of the lockdown. Now, coming to talk about the 300 million naira special fund, actually, the methodology is still being fine-tuned. But also, remember that BOI has never waited for any special fund. We've always done, most of the funding, from our own fund. In fact, last year, that was 2020, I think August 2020, we were able to cross the 50 billion risk asset mark. As we speak today, we're on 59 billion risk asset, support across the various sectors, of the creative industry. So we've been doing quite a lot. 300 million naira is just a paltry sum, actually. Yeah, we were actually designated the fund for special subsector, within the creative space, which has to do with art and craft, right? But we felt that it's a subsector that has to be fine-tuned. The parameters have to be right before we start, disbursing that. So for now, we have not started disbursing, all right? We've not finalized the parameters, within that product fund. But however, for those who are interested in it, come to us directly and we learn from our fund. So that's where we are right now.
Well, thank you, Promise. But I think, just also speaking really bluntly, with BOI, there have been a lot of these intervention funds over the years, but you find that many practitioners complain about being able to access it because the model is sort of tied to the traditional, or bring collateral, bring something. And for me, I think that this defeats the purpose of the Creative Industry Fund itself, because the Creative Industry Fund is about intellectual property and not about real estate property. So in what way, just quickly, can you respond to that? Because many industry practitioners have not been still able to access these funds. So how are you changing, how are you shifting that paradigm so that people can access these funds? And in terms of numbers, how many people could you say? Could you say that you impacted 500 businesses, 10 within this period?
Okay, let me give a quick response to that, right? I may shock you. that we never had an intervention fund since 2012 that we started the creative industry, group.
You never had a what?
Intervention fund.
Okay.
No, it had never been intervention. It has always been our own indigenous fund. All right. The first time we came close to that was something like the Nolly Fund, product program that we created. Right. It was a $1 billion special product fund, and what we did was actually, design that particular product away from the traditional parameters. And of course, you're aware of it, that we never collected a single collateral from that particular fund. It was a fund that was actually designated for the Nolly Fund producers, right? Those in the production infrastructure sector, which has to do with editing, shoot, and so on and so forth, and even the cinemas. We never collected any dime. That was a free collateral form, actually. It was a special form. But right now, it's no longer existing because there are issues we can't talk about right now. However, we have been very, very generous with our fund, because you also know that we operate under the CBN guideline. You don't expect to give this fund without your security, okay? And that's why if you're coming on a big side, what I mean by a big side, that you're coming to pick a big form, pick up a big, size form. Of course, you need to secure it because we also have to respond. We are accountable to our regulators, which is the CBN, okay? But nevertheless, we've never had any special intervention form since we started the creative industry, and that's a fact.
So promise. I mean, I'm going to come back to you, and I think there's a breakout panel conversation because, again, we would argue that this is the very reason why it's creative industry. But if you're using the CBN traditional method, then you're failed already because people can't access that. But I'll come back to you.
Sorry, before you leave. You were trying to know the number of people who have accessed this form?
Yes.
As I speak to you right now, we have about 59 customers on our portfolio.
Fantastic. And thank you. And we will come back to that. But thank you so much for that response, Promise.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. So, Ferdinand, since you make magical storytelling common in Nigeria, my question for you is this. Do you think there's a sort of content we should be focusing on, so that we can reach a more global audience? Or do you think that just the African stories as we're telling is good enough?
Well, I think that African stories can be told in a way that is global, but the detail in telling that story requires a certain kind of art, not just the talent. So what we've done in the last 4 years was to develop a story department. And in the last movie, The Passport of Madame Ilia, though we adapted it from a novel, we had to send a couple of guys to go to Kano. They spent about a month doing research because, again, we all live in Lagos. We're not from the North. If we're going to tell a story about the North, we want to be able to tell it accurately and also tell it in a way that is universal and global. So we put in the work, and with every step of the way, I started to appreciate the fact that there is a lot more that needs to go into a movie from the story angle than from the camera angle. And when we get the story right, we travel further. Generally, animation is usually a very exportable product. Globally, they do better than live action. Literally, there's been up to date, there has been no animation movie that have made a loss, right, globally. We're working on the first 2D feature film. The challenges are here. We don't have enough capacity. So as a studio, we had to backtrack and then started doing training, which was not part of our model, but we had to train people to onboard them. When it comes to funding is an issue. I know we've been in talks with a bank like BOI, and they'll throw collateral to your face. The point is that for a lot of creative companies, you can't access a particular threshold without a certain kind of collateral. But again, they are a bank, they need to protect their investment and the rest. But creativity requires a lot more thinking than just the traditional banking approach. For a lot of people, we must learn to bank on the IP. I don't know why they don't take the IP as a collateral. They insist that it has to be substantiated by some real estate or cash in the bank. And of course, by the time you have to go through that route, you realize that you're spending more time looking for money than you are building your movie or telling your film. So that is a challenge we've had. But yes, we have great stories from our literature to our folk tales and story tales. The world is waiting for that. Disney has been doing a retelling of their old stories. 2 years ago, they released Lion King. 25 years after, Mulan came out. We only just saw Coming Back to America because somehow the stories are stretched to the maximum. We haven't even touched ours. So the stories we read growing up, it is a huge opportunity for us to tell those stories and tell them from an angle that can travel.
So, and thank you so much for giving us context. and I love the fact that you're retelling some of these stories. And you're right, we haven't started telling even a quarter. What am I saying? We haven't started talking about even a quarter of the stories that are uniquely Nigerian. Another question, just really around the technical skills gap that we have. If you had your way, and if BOI, for example, said, or even Mastercard said, look, we're going to do something about the skills gap, what kind of skills and what kind of training would you recommend for the industry?
For me, because I'm in animation, I'm actually very much in touch with the fact that we need more animators. Interestingly, animation is one area in the creative space that is, softwares are not demanding less people, they're demanding more people. So, and then the world is just looking at Africa, so we need more people. In fact, animators in our studio, in the next coming years, they will be earning in dollars because it's really what it is, exporting real stories. That's one. I also think we need to, in the creative space, there is also a capacity to deepen the story side. Maybe because I'm in entertainment, I know that we have people who write stories, but they can be better in terms of how the stories are made. I think in terms of expanding the options of our storytelling, you need more creativity. So we're still exploring range, jealousy, and the emotions that we touch are usually the same. Let's expand the story options, the emotions, the range of emotions are limitless. You can touch on grief and guilt, but our stories are really about cheating and all of those things, so we can do better. Animation programming is also something that I think will not slow down. With everyone thinking digital, if you can be able to see how that intersection between programming and technology, there's a lot of people looking out for people who can do UX, UI, people who can think data, people who can actually take creativity and express them in, there's the business of creativity and there's the art of creativity. And I learned both on my journey, right? Knowing that when we spend time thinking story, if we don't have the capacity or the talent to develop the business side, we're going to struggle. So we had to get proper lawyers. It was expensive, but it was worth it. Our lawyer is even here, Punuka. We had to get them. We had to also get a business consultant to help us with our pitch deck, help us with the meetings with the investors. Local investors don't understand creativity, and especially animation. Animation will take about 24 months to make a movie. The average Nigerian investor is a deals man. He wants to make money in 3 months. So I put it down, I get a percentage. So they're not naturally wired for a long-term investment that will give you 7 years yield. So it's something I would recommend that everyone should.
Oh, I think we may have lost him. Freddie, are you still there?
Consider, but I'm happy to train people in animation. So we as a studio, we've taken on that responsibility. One of the deals we are working on with BOI is to run an academy, an Andela for animators. That's something we hope to come on stream in August, right? We're going to train about 100 people, and it comes with guaranteed employment. This is one area where we can guarantee employment.
Okay, so I think Freddie has some internet issues. So
as long as you're good.
Okay, Freddie, sorry for cutting off. I think the internet was fluctuating. But thank you very much. This has been quite enlightening. So we'll be taking questions now from the audience. So if you have a question, just type it in the chat box and I'm happy to take them. But I'll go quickly back to Ojoma while we take questions as well. And my question to you is, how is technology and the fourth industrial revolution shaping Nigeria's creative sector? And are we likely to miss out on this opportunity? I mean, just going back to the conversation around, manufacturing or service-led industry, what is your response to this? That's one part. But secondly, how does Nigeria now compare to the rest of Africa? Because we're seeing a lot of turbulence and a lot of pulling away from Nigeria, even though it has this giant status in quotes. But I think beyond that, the question really is what are those things, those elements that will change the narrative and make Nigeria a truly global marketplace?
Thanks, Aldo. Interesting that you asked me that question. I'm writing a paper at the moment, looking at a paper for UNESCO, looking at the state of the global digital environment for creative industries. So looking around the world and seeing the trends in technology and saying, what do we reckon are the main sort of technologies that will drive disruption in this sector around the world? And it's a really interesting exercise in the context of Nigeria, because what the research is saying is that there are certain key technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, extended reality. So that's like augmented reality and so on. Those kinds of technologies that will fundamentally change the way that we consume creative content or entertainment content, whatever we want to call it. And there's obviously the obvious ones like platforms and distribution and how people consume the content. And I feel like looking at the trends and looking at Nigeria, we're inordinately focused on the distribution elements. So we're focused on how do I get my content, whether it's music or film or short form content, how do I get it to the consumer quicker, more efficiently, to reduce wastage and illegal copying and so on. And that seems to be the preoccupation, which is valid because those are immediate problems. I fear that if you look at the broad range of technologies that will disrupt the industry, like artificial intelligence and so on, in the sector, we're not necessarily thinking about those technologies and embedding them in the way that we work. So what do we mean? So like recommender systems, right? That use artificial intelligence to predict what is an audience most likely to enjoy based on the trends in behavior of what they've watched before on a platform, for example. So those kinds of things, I feel like we now need to be making more of a conscious effort to think about it in the creative industries. Those skills around artificial intelligence and so on exist, right? They're working in the fintech sector. They're working in maybe agriculture to help improve farmers' yield or whatever. So I feel like the sector needs to start building strong, meaningful relationships with the tech industry because we have that tech talent. It's not that it doesn't exist. I fear it just doesn't exist in the creative industries. We need to start looking at things like, what's the role of hardware, for example, in shaping how the creative industries in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time will function? And what kind of supports can we start giving young, hardware-leaning tech people now to make them consider what this can do in the creative industries rather than just in the other sectors where it seems that the focus is. So in a nutshell, long story short, I think there are lots of technologies that will disrupt the value chains. We're only focused on a minute element of that. And so the industry needs stronger, more meaningful partnerships with tech, with academia. Somebody from creative industries needs to be in OAU now, like psyching those coders, those programmers to look at the creative sector and use some of those skills in the creative sector, because that talent exists, but I think those connections are not yet made.
Thank you so much.
John,
yeah, thank you. Well said. So I'll just go quickly to a question from one of the attendees, and the question for Freddie and anyone else who would be kind enough to share. Since you are talking about investors curious, I'm curious about what your investment instrument structures. Sorry, let me take that again. Since you're talking about investors, I'm curious about what the investment structures you have explored in terms of deal sizes, debt or equity, returns and duration targets, data or anecdotes would be helpful. Thank you. And the question is a bit long, so you can look at the question in the chat box. So Freddie, do you want to take that really quickly? Then I'll.
Yes. I think with a film structure, we basically explore an SPV. And we created a special purpose vehicle for each of the projects we're working on. We offered there was an option of equity. There was an option of non-convertible debenture for people who wanted to also go that route. But essentially, the formula is the same. And it's something that is very detailed. I mean, the documents are there. We can always share. But for a moment like this, we may not necessarily. So if there's an email, I can send you some models we've explored that have been mildly successful, relatively successful, and we're still working on improving on them.
Freddie, so I can tell you for free that she works for Argentil. They have a lot of money. So I just get my percentage from moderating this panel. I'll get 5%, and then I'll pass you guys. The second question then is, what are creative entrepreneurs offering investors in terms of returns and comfort to compel them to underwrite this unique asset class, given the somewhat more compelling risk and return profiles of other asset classes in the market? Is there a need for creative entrepreneurs to strategically position themselves in a unique asset class and collectively control the narrative that is not a charity or spray or pray events investment case? Money is made in the sector and is increasingly becoming predictable and reliable from strong off-takers like Netflix. Maybe Sam, you want to take this question? And then Freddie or any other person wants to jump on that question.
Yeah, well, it's very reasonable. And actually, I saw Paul Okogio also asked a little bit about, collaterals and so on. I guess that's where we're leaning towards. The one thing about asset classes is they need to be recognized and need to be recognized by the financial institutions as a way. And the most important aspect to an asset class is the predictability of revenues and funds. So Aldo, it's an issue that you've worked on for many years, trying to help fix, in the music industry specifically, is the residual revenues. It's all great and well to make a ton of money off of shows and endorsements and all that, but the actual rights, the intellectual property that underpins all the creative work is where the long tail comes. The use of the music in films, on TV shows, being played in radio stations and public performance. So there is a need, and it is developing more and more in the West. Intellectual property is essentially being traded like an asset class, I think people may have heard, even though Jay-Z and Beyonce seem to be refuting the claims that they purchased DMX's catalog, because they know you can look at whether they bought it or not. It's just a recent example to call to the issue, because you can look at a catalog of music and say, over the next couple of years, from streaming to public play, etc., this will produce this amount of money, and therefore you can loan against it. But I think it goes even a bit further than that. That's all great and well for when there's better structure, when performance rights are being collected, when royalties are being paid, and so on, and as that extends into the other aspects of the creative industry. But I think even beyond that, for a business like Trace, I'm only using us because I'm here and I know about it, right? The amounts of money that we're raising or may raise to do any given project or expansion are in the ranges where banks, of course, are banks and investors are looking at us like a normal or traditional investment. But for many entrepreneurs and creatives, the investment levels are palatable, right? And just like we can often work with collectives, and microfinance banks can work with market women, knowing that they'll pay back even if the interest rates are high. They'll pay back over time. So I think it's actually going a bit beyond just saying, at least at the point where we're at, where it's beyond saying, okay, what are the traditional asset classes and how do we change that for the industry? While Trace and Chocolate City and many of us have been lucky to build solid businesses, there's hundreds of thousands of guys out there with small studios, or even a wedding event coverage business, right? That could use a $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 loan. And yeah, we need to look at the top end, but we need to look at the bottom end as well.
Thanks, Sam. So we're going to be rounding up in a few minutes, but I do want to take.
I'd love to hear what Ojoma is going to say.
Yeah, can I just jump in quickly? Just very quickly.
No, Ojoma, you can't jump in quickly. I'm just joking. I was actually going to come back to you anyway, actually, because I wanted you to answer a question relating to how women are being denied or empowered, or what the situation is with women's participation in the creative economy in light of some of these.
Okay, I can say them both. The risk thing, I just want to challenge this idea that creative industries are inherently riskier or more risky. I do not believe that we have enough data to make that assertion, number one. Number two, where data exists in other contexts, it's in fact proven that investments in creative industries are no more or less risky than investments in any other sector when you adjust for the different factors. So in a specifically Nigerian context, let's even say we have anecdotal evidence that creative industry investments are riskier. Let's assume. I would put the onus back on the investor. If you're investing based on personalities rather than business plans, if you're investing in the product rather than the business, if your investment fails, that's on you. It's not on the sector. If you want to invest in oil and gas, you'll go and understand how it works. You'll go and understand where value is created, right? If you want to invest in agriculture, you'll do the same. They don't do that for creative industries, but then turn around and cry when the investments don't work out. So I'm just strongly challenging the idea that creative industries investments are riskier, until somebody shows me a spreadsheet where the anchor borrower scheme in agriculture, say, is bringing back fewer non-performing loans than creative industries. I'm sorry, I don't agree that creative industries are a riskier investment prospect. I thought I'd just say that.
Joma, you look at the comments right now, you are bossing it already, and now you just leveled up.
Thank you. Second thing on women, I think that's really interesting. So I feel like if you think about it as a sort of pyramid, at the very top of the ecosystem, I feel like there's lots of really powerful women, right? I feel like there's a missing middle in terms of women. And I feel like we don't talk enough about the harassment, the abuse, the poor behavior of non-women towards women in the creative industries. I didn't call any names, non-women. I feel like we don't talk about that enough. Like, sets are not safe. Aspiring creative women wanting to work in the creative industries are subjected to unspeakable things. And it's not a creative industries problem. It's emblematic of a bigger problem that Nigeria has with women, and that many countries and many parts of the world have with women. I think another thing to say as well, in terms of sort of demographics in creative industries, I think there's also a thing with young people where, again, in Nigeria as a society, we do not respect young people. And because of the dominance of young people in the industry, I feel like that's another reason why the sector is given a bad name. And people talk about risk, or people talk about lack of structure, and people talk about things that are acceptable in other sectors. But because of young people in the creative industries and our lack of respect for them, we sort of harp on that and say, for those reasons, we don't think that the industry works well. So those are just a couple points I want to make. I think we can do better as a people to support young people and to support women wanting to work in the industry. And it's not just a job for women. It's a job for women and non-women to support all of these other demographics in the sector.
Thank you. Can I just make a 1-minute statement, please? You know, by 2030, we're looking at a post-oil economy. I don't think we have much in the way of options to ignore creativity. So for people that are saying the creative industry is riskier and we don't have enough data, I think it's more about perspective than about the data. We do have data, but we're pioneering on many levels. Pioneering means that it comes with a measure of you looking beyond just the return on investment, which is very good, but looking at the cultural impact. I mean, if we export our stories, there is more in the way of the cultural impact, the significance of strengthening our identity, you know, reinforcing something about Africa that it's lost in the world, contribution within the creative capital or the creative economy. So I really think that it's for every one of us to strengthen, even policy conversation. If the CBN cannot recognize IP as a collateral, then we need to change the policies that is underpinning that. But I can tell you, if you give me a loan at 8% and a collateral, dependent on a collateral that I can't provide, then you've given me no help at all. I think it's important we start to understand the peculiarities of the creative economy and structure what can help us build that industry. It's not going to be brick and mortar or the way the traditional industries work. But if we do this, we're likely to unlock more and reduce unemployment. Because if there is a chance we're going to reduce unemployment, the creative economy has the answer to that.
And Freddie, thank you so much. I think, Freddie, you actually just stole the words out of my mouth, because I was going to round up with that the whole purpose of this panel is to talk about how this leads to jobs. As you all know, Jobberman, their job is to place people in places to get work. And Mastercard has been empowering people for years. Unless people get the true value, understand the value of the creative economy and what that means in Naira and Kobo. And I'm glad that Ojomal kind of spoke a bit about the work that they've done in the British Council. Maybe that'll be a breakout session breakdown of what they've done over the past 15 years to have created jobs and to change the narrative for the creative economy, not just in the UK, but also around the world. We will never ever get to the point whereby we value creatives properly. Obviously, there are many disconnects. Somebody put in the comment section that they worked with one of my artists and the experience was really bad. Please, we'll be happy to talk about that and find out what that is. But that mutual respect for the creative arts is missing. People don't respect the craft and they don't treat people as they should. And these are things you can learn. And these are better done in the context of unions and in guilds and associations and things that set standards. If you're doing anything in America, there's a writers guild. You need to comply with those laws and bylaws for you to be able to benefit from that opportunity. So I think my time is up. They've asked me to shut up. But before I do so, I would like to thank every single member of the panel. And I think it's not fair. Promise is a guy who promised us a lot of money and we're not hearing from him. So Promise, back to you, and I'll let you have the final word.
All right.
The accusations that you haven't shifted your position as to the valuation of assets, you haven't done the job or the work that has to do with data. My question is that from your experience funding 59 companies, how bad has that data been for the creative industry companies you funded? Is it true, or are these just spurious allegations?
You see, the truth of the matter is that there is no consolidated data structure, in the industry.
Could you have your picture? Could you have your video, please? So we
okay,
can...
all right. All right. Like I mentioned, I said creative industry space is a kind of is an emergency response from Bank of Industry. And the reason is this: we've seen the potentials in the industry in terms of job spinning, in terms of value addition. And so we are not just waiting for a consolidated data structure. We decided to deal on a case-by-case basis. And also know that apart from agriculture, creative industry has one of the largest subsectors, do you understand, within that purview. So what we've done in the last 8 years is to take those subsectors one after the other. Today we have about 9. And then one of the latest sectors was also bringing in is the animation sector. And also know that we are not getting subventions as we should. So we are buying our money we're sourcing our money from the foreign land, which we have to pay for. So whatever be the case, we also have to look at the risk, mitigant analysis, so to speak. All right. So, but that being said, let me also assure you that if we have done 50 billion in the last 8 years and we are targeting to hit 100 billion by 2023, you should know the effort we are also driving to make sure we accommodate every player in the industry. In the case of women, today we have one of the most vibrant department or group, right, which has gone from units to group in BOI, and that's the gender group. The gender group has done about 32 billion naira. And today, as we speak, this year's budget, the budget set for them this year is about 30 billion naira. And they have to deliver on that. And that's because we understand the disadvantages within that gender space. And apart from that, we also have youth programs, all right, that we are driving currently. In fact, they had a mandate that they should go back and restructure, right, all the youth product programs so that we can actually drive what I'll call deeper developmental drive, within the sector. So we respect youth, we respect women, we respect the creative. And of course, we agree with me that 10 years ago, the question or the notion in the industry was that the industry was risky, no structure, no this, no that. But we took a risk. We started from production to distribution, from distribution to production infrastructure, from production infrastructure to hospitality, from hospitality. Now we're even looking at the digital aspect of distribution, which has to do with online. We've done well with Iroko. We're looking at Ibaka. We're looking at some of these online structures. So we are not actually relenting. But you should know that a tree does not make a forest. We also need partners, right? We can't be talking about that. We look at for companies that are involved in data management. We'll partner with them. And of course, British Council here speaking. Ojoma is also our partner. So we are looking at partnering with, agencies that actually support the creative industry. So be that as it may, you understand with me that we have got a big agenda for creative industry. This year alone, we are putting aside 36 billion or 36 billion there for the industry alone. So that is where I want to end my point. Thank you for listening.
So Promise, thank you so much. And on behalf of the organizers of this fantastic roundtable, I want to say a huge thank you to the panelists, Ojoma, Sam, Ferdy, Promise, and Yemi couldn't make it. And obviously, Mastercard and Jobberman, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Aldo Kori, and see you in the next panel. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Aldo. What a rich conversation, or do I say fire conversation. I think these are the discussions we need to have, right? Where we are speaking honestly and openly, and it's the only way to move forward. So many points stood out from relooking, the risk that people have attached to the creative sector, assets that can be used from the gender perspective, to also just speaking about technical and soft skills as a whole. Thank you so much to our panelists, and I hope everyone online has also enjoyed that conversation and looking forward to taking these discussions forward. Okay, great. I know we're running a bit behind time, and I'm sure everyone can understand that that session did require that amount of time. But for now, we'll be moving to our breakout sessions. And these will essentially be led by our moderators, whom you may have seen already in our agenda. I will briefly introduce them, just being mindful of time. I will mention their names. And then after that, we will then go into our different breakout sessions. Just to let everybody know that some of you had already selected your breakout sessions when you were registering. And for those who hadn't, you can also then select which breakout session to go into. Okay, great. So going into our moderation, our moderators for today, I think the names have already mentioned. Paul Okwego from CCX. He's actually one of the founders at Chocolate City Music. And then we also have Kemi Juba Martins, Creative Director at K Aspen. We have Kainde Afolabi, Associate Director at Rele Gallery. And we have Isioma Edigbe, Head Media and Entertainment and Intellectual Property Law at Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors. So these are our esteemed moderators. They will be leading the breakout sessions. And then after the breakout sessions, they will then present a quick summary, so 1 to 2 minutes each, summary of what was discussed during those breakout sessions and what's coming out from them. So just to introduce the topics of the breakout sessions. So breakout session 1 is focused on developing new monetization models for the arts. No surprises here, this has been a key topic today. This is focused on industries of digital arts, or rather the topics of digital arts and NFTs, copyright, and accessing global markets. Very pertinent topic. Then this will be moderated by Kainde Afolabi. Then breakout session 2, sustainable financing for the entertainment value chain. This will be moderated by Isioma Edigbe. Breakout session 3 will be towards increased local production, developing Nigeria's blue collar talent pipeline, moderated by Kemi Juba Martins. And then finally, breakout session 4, post-COVID recovery, exploring new models for survival. This will be moderated by Paul Okwego. Okay, great. So this is just to give everyone an idea of the different sessions. And I think here we had just wanted to provide everyone with just a bit more detail on each of the sessions. So under each one, beyond the title of sustainable financing for the entertainment value chain, we'll also have regulation, copyright, financing, skills development, social media, and connecting with new audiences, as well as globalization of Nigerian music, the breakout session 2. So that is just to highlight to you that, there are sub-discussions that will be happening in each section. Then financing, marketing, beauty, and the blue-collar talent pipeline will be under the towards increased local production, developing Nigeria's blue-collar talent pipeline. Then finally, post-COVID recovery, exploring new models for survival. Under there, we'll be speaking about new models for survival and financing, particularly for the tourism and hospitality side of the creative sector. So without any further ado, I think our team will be allowing everybody to go into their various breakout sessions. So please do indicate once you have been able to go into a session. Thanks, Nika.
So you should be able to join the breakout rooms now that they're open. Just join whichever one you think suits your interests. And if you need us to assign you, just drop in the chat which rooms you'd like to join. Remember also to not be Sheila J when you do this, because I wouldn't know who to assign to where. Just please go to the corner of your name and rename yourself. And then if you can't join yourself, I will assign you to the breakout rooms.
Nikki,
Hi, Rashma.
hi. How long is the breakout session?
About 45 minutes.
Okay.
It's supposed to end about 12, yes.
Okay, so I'll be back in 45 minutes. I'm online, but
No worries. I'm still assigning people. I know you're dropping in the chat. Just apologies for the delay. But if you have the new version of Zoom, you should be able to join the rooms on your own. If you want me to assign you, please just join. First, rename yourself and then join. Drop it in the chat.
Yeah, I've dropped it in the chat, but I'm yet to be responded to. My name is Abdulkarim Mohammed.
Your name is? Your name is what?
Abdulkarim Mohammed.
Hello. Oh, okay. The issue might be, okay, Abdulkarim Mohammed, I can see you. What room do you want to go to?
Two.
What room do you want me to send you to?
Room 2, room 2.
Financing for entertainment, okay.
Thank you.
If you're struggling to change your name, please just go to the top right corner. I could change it for you. I just wouldn't know who is who. So please just go to the top right. Beside your name, you should see in participants, beside your name, you should be able to see change, rename option.
Across the table, starts moving to her mind. You know, I may be on me,
Hi,
but
we can hear you.
And I am not that little squeeze. Don't worry about it. Yeah, the guys. Yes, he's. This is where I messed up. Shouldn't have done it. And this picture. Performance.
Welcome back, everyone. I see that most participants are back and our breakout sessions have been closed out. So sorry to anyone who got cut off.
We were
trying to round up.
We were taken back forcibly. We are not happy.
We are so sorry, Paul. I know in our session, there were closing thoughts being shared and then it ended. So hence I opened with that statement. But Paul, please, you will have your few minutes now to take back that time and share with us insights from your breakout sessions. So thank you so much to everyone for joining in that conversation. Apologies for people getting cut off, but moderators, if you can please share, what was discussed in your rooms and obviously remind us of the topic that was covered in your breakout session. Since Paul is already feeling very passionate, I think let's start with him and then we will then go to our other moderators.
Yeah, I mean, thank you guys very much. I mean, it was a good experience and good sort of for me catching up with fellow owners of sort of hotels and entertainment spaces. We had a lot of Sheilas in the room who made some sort of good contributions. We started calling them Sheila 1, Sheila 2. But it was very clear, I mean, from the beginning that, the first question about, recovery from COVID, which was, what is the real impact? Is it an impact? That was quite simple to answer. Yes, there was a massive impact. And the reasons were quite simple. You're moving from a business that is dependent on live and then the live suddenly disappears. It takes the bottom out of sort of a lot of businesses. So that was pretty easy to answer for sort of most people. But interesting things is what we see people doing to adjust to that COVID. I was talking to IK, who happens to be the CEO of the Love Portion hub in Songotedo, where they have a facility that does several things at the same time. It's like a hybrid business. So no longer depending. And luckily for them, they started during COVID. So no longer now depending on only one or two models for revenue, which is F&B, but now beginning to expand their revenue generating processes to include setting of space and creating experiences sort of outside live. Now, the interesting thing with that is there's an immediate problem with the revenue model itself. I mean, how do you create the same experience and charge the same money? For an F&B place, somebody comes in and he pays a certain amount times 500 people, you get your revenue. But with the hub, with having more intimate events, that number greatly reduces, and so the business now begins to adjust to its new reality. It was quite interesting to see what young people are doing to sort of rethink and re-engineer how they approach entertainment business. One of the great comments that we had, and we started talking about what ideas how do we go forward from here? And I heard a few very interesting things that I agree with. One of them was how we need to work more sort of collaboratively to begin to even have better protection, better insulation. Somebody made the point that there was no sort of concerted effort to protect the industry from a sort of global point of view, and how the sort of I think it was NESG's responded. So there is need to create bodies or teams around looking at this industry particularly holistically and helping it to be able to anticipate problems and sort of setting the policies around how these businesses are to survive depending on the situation. One big comment as well when we asked about what do we do going forward is somebody asked a great question about bounce back financing, and I think that was very interesting to talk about that. Yes, people are still optimistic that when COVID goes away, people will rush in to access these businesses, but people forget that in the time, especially I shared my own experiences with CCX as well. In the time where we've been closed, there's been quite a lot of sort of losses. a lot of things have degraded from an equipment point of view. The experience is not the same. And so being able to restart the business also requires quite a lot of bounce back financing. And how do we get that financing? Vis-a-vis what we discussed in the earlier in the morning, how banks and sort of lenders view our business. But the advantage, the silver lining here is that for businesses that are tourism-based, hotels, restaurants, cafes, what we call HoReCa, is that they do have history, financial history. So it's easier, I think, perhaps a little easier to explain to a bank, I want money and I make X amounts every week and things like that. So certainly it was interesting. There needs to be conversation around, one, how do we collaborate more to talk about protection and sort of looking forward, getting better forecasts for the industry as a whole, as opposed to allowing individuals to sort of work their own salvation, so to speak, as a whole. I mean, what happens when there's something? Do you close the borders? How do you adjust from a holistic point of view? And secondly, what are the financing models that are needed for people to bounce back when COVID does go away? And the final thing that I'll say is that the technology around it, marrying these businesses now with tech, like what Love Potion is doing right now, is looking at ways to now begin to provide experiences online, and what those experiences will be like if they're not directly live and you can't touch and feel them. So yeah, it was quite interesting, and
fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for summarizing it into those 3 key points. I think it makes it practical, right? And it also just helps to bring everyone around where to focus their efforts during this recovery period. Just to remind everyone, the session Paul moderated was focused on post-COVID recovery, exploring new models for survival. And this was focused on the tourism and hospitality segment of the creative sector, so travel, hotels, restaurants, etc. Thank you, Paul. All right, so moving to the, presentation of findings from the next breakout session 1. If Kinde Afolabi could just provide us with a quick recap. Her breakout session was focused on developing new monetization models for art. And under this covered industries within visual arts, art, woodwork, digital art, and design. Thanks, Kinde.
Thank you, Amanda, for that. Thank you, everyone, for joining. For our breakout section, developing new monetization for art, we spoke basically about the art and the art environment, if we're being taken seriously. Most people definitely said that on an international level, we're not taken seriously, and this stems from the fact that we ourselves don't take ourselves seriously. And this also is a result of our educational system. So from the universities, the secondary schools, even primary level. So the result or the solution to this is that we have to revisit our educational system. We have to start critical thinking and research from the primary level. So that will be from the basic level for us to create a critical environment for our art to be taken seriously. We also focused on opportunities for art and artists. So artists like visual artists, designers, photographers, digital artists. And we said that definitely social media is a platform for opportunities. So most artists or all the artists have to be on social media if they want to get new opportunities. They cannot just wait for the government or individuals to bring opportunities to them. They have to take it a step forward by, going online. Then we spoke about the government. If the government is doing anything, most people said no, but we had people that said that, yes, the government is doing, some governments are doing, they're intervening, like the Ekiti and Ondo state governors who are sponsoring the Young Contemporaries program by Relay Gallery. So it would be great if we can, visit our public officers, visit the people in power. We don't know. They may have like openings, or somebody in there maybe interested in the creative, in what we are doing. So we have to take a step forward by visiting them and sending our proposals to them. We never can tell. Lastly, we spoke about public-private collaboration, where we shouldn't just leave everything to individuals or leave everything to the government. Both sectors have to come together to make this industry a better industry. So that's all from my end. Thank you very much. Amanda?
Thank you so much. Yes,
Great.
I'm here. Thank you so much, Kainde.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you providing that recap. Also sounds like an engaging session. I know I was actually in that session with you, so that's where I knew people are getting cut off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving
Thank
on
you so much.
You're welcome. Moving on to Breakout Session 2, moderated by Isioma Edigbe. The topic was sustainable financing for the entertainment value chain. This was focused on media and entertainment, so industries including music, film, comedy, TV, radio, digital marketing, etc. Over to you, Isioma.
Hi, thank you, Amanda. Well, in our session, which was sadly cut off when it was really reaching its peak, we largely discussed on what sort of financial support, services or products were available on the market, and what the role of the government and stakeholders is in developing the financing infrastructure behind the sector. We had comments from Peter Otabo, who is a consultant, Bolade, and Mobolaji of Bolade from Kuramo Capital, and Mobolaji of Talent X. Some of the things that were resolved really was that there was a need for creative financing hybrid options to be explored, as opposed to a reliance on traditional financing options. Interesting comments from Talent X on how they've been able, as a venture capital company, to invest in the sector using largely an equity structure for sort of newer players, particularly in the film industry, and you also having a mix of debt for more established production companies. So that was very interesting to see a local private sector led financing option. Challenges with accessing the government options at the Bank of Industry, the CBN CFI loan were discussed, and the need for those to be accessed much easier by stakeholders was also discussed. There was also discussions around the need for data, although there were sort of counter arguments on, well, there's no data, and there were counter arguments of, is the issue really that there's no data, or that data is being analyzed with very traditional indices that don't necessarily work for the creative industries. This was a comment by Peter Tabo, who is a consultant, and Bolade from Kuramo Capital talked very much about Kuramo Capital exploring, for instance, almost, with the issue of IP as collateral, being able to finance projects, for instance, that had guaranteed off-takers. And he gave examples of some sort of the deals that they have been seeing originating from the gaming sector. So that was very interesting. In terms of the role of government, there was an assertion that government has not necessarily played its role. And yes, there was also a comment from Abdul Karim as well on this point. So the comment initially, which came from Audu, was that government has not necessarily played its role in creating an enabling environment for the for finance, for the growth of the financing of the sector. This was also voiced as well by Mobolaji of Talent X about, some of the roles of Bank of Industry or CBN being sort of standing in the risk, to encourage more private sector financing institutions to get involved. I also raised the issue of the absence of insurance as a risk mitigating institution being involved within that to further de-risk the interactions between investors and the creative industries, which was agreed by everyone who was on our breakout session. In terms of the role of government, again, there was a lot of comments. Abdulkarim in particular talked about the lack of synergy between the different government agencies that have regulatory powers within the sector. And I sort of countered back as well, saying, well, there's also this lack of synergy within the industry players, participants, in terms of one, there being a need for the participants, where we say participants, the creatives, the business owners within the sector, to one, articulate exactly what is the creative industry and articulate some kind of policy documents that can guide the actions of government, and sort of working together to actively lobby government to do their part to create an enabling environment for them, which of course would help with improving financing options and developing sustainable financing within the sector. I pretty much think that was most of our conversation. We didn't really get to talk about social media and all of that, because the discussion about financing is really quite robust, and sort of most of our discussions focused on that.
All right, thank you so much, Isioma. Definitely a hot topic and has come up quite a number of times, and rightly so, right? So thank you so much for sharing the insights from your session and moderating for us today. All right, moving to our final moderator, Kemi Juba-Martins. She was moderating Breakout Session 3. This was focused on, moving towards increased local production, developing Nigeria's blue-collar talent pipeline. And this largely covered beauty, fashion, and lifestyle. Thank you so much, Kemi.
Okay.
Hi.
All right, so we had a very interesting conversation. We spoke about how should Nigeria actually concentrate on manufacturing like China or India, or should we move on to something else? And what would that path look like? And we're like, oh, services is looking better than production, because we don't really have the basic infrastructure to manufacture. Manufacturing requires a lot of infrastructure capabilities, and right now we don't have that. And to get that, we would have to, the government would have to play its part. And for this conversation, we try to avoid talking about what we don't have from the government, because obviously that's the stereotypical discussions we have in all those conferences. So we looked at what we could do as private individuals, and we spoke about we used India as an example. How in the 1980s they looked at the world and saw what the world needed, and looked in to find, looked in to ask themselves what they could give. And we used India and Singapore as an example. And we saw that, India actually had a shift, because population-wise, we're very similar in economy and everything. So we looked at how they evolved from where they were currently to where they are now. And they actually invested in education. They invested in, learning something that the world would need from them, which is the back-end operations, tech. So India is basically the tech hub for most of the corporations we have now globally. They made themselves available. They made themselves, they upskilled themselves to be able to deliver that kind of capability to the world. And so can we use this approach to look at Nigeria? And we're like, yes. We looked at the value chain. We're like, using the fashion industry as an example, we have a lot of segments. Fashion starts from conceptualization, not even product, conceptualization to design, to production, to marketing and sales. And we also have the supply. So if we look at the value chain, production is just a fraction of what that entire value chain is. So how do we get more young people, to conceptualize and tell the African story to people? How do we get more people to learn about design using technological softwares, or using softwares that people use internationally, for production processes? Okay, instead of looking at manufacturing, what are resources? Let's look at the resources we have here. Let's look at how we can get these resources out to other countries, as opposed to actually building the finished product or always looking at building the finished product. So we also looked at that and we're like, oh, marketing and sales. For marketing and sales, how do we, right now, the problem isn't even the finished product. It's how to get this product across the global market. So if we can teach more people how to market creative products, how to market fashion products, how to tell the story of the creation to the world, then I think we've done a bit of the service part as opposed to just, looking into manufacturing, because truth be told, everyone agreed right now, we do not have the capability to manufacture. Manufacture is a 50 to 100 year plan. Look at China is a typical example. When the Renaissance happened for them, they shifted from the 1970s. They had a plan of, from 1978 to be precise, they had a manufacturing or a framework where from then till now, they literally tripled their GDP through manufacturing. And for us to get there, it takes a long process, where everyone has to play his part. Do we have that now? No, because as odd as it sounds, we can't do it alone. We'll need basic governmental infrastructure. So that's where we agreed on that. And we also looked at, we looked at the government. So what does the government have to do to incentivize encouraging production locally? And we're like, imagine having a situation where you're like, if you produce locally, you have some sort of pension plan, you'd have some sort of something to retire to, or we'll give you access to market, like I said earlier, because imagine already having off-takers for the products you want to manufacture. We'll give you off-takers because whether we like it or not, the government is the largest buyer right now. We don't really have that access to market yet, but we established that there are few platforms, international platforms coming up, both international and local platforms that have used or that are using or that have recognized the talent in Nigeria and are trying to push this out there. So we looked at few platforms and we're like, okay, so if we do this, what is this going to look like on a much larger scale? So if the government can actually make access to market easier, the way of doing business easier, then I feel that those are incentives enough to actually encourage anyone to, start. Because let's look at it, you won't really start a business if you're not sure of how the market is globally, if there are people ready to buy products. But believe it or not, there are a lot of people, and I mentioned something, I was like, right now, a lot of people are dying. Dying is exaggerating, I know, but a lot of people are, a lot of people want African-made products. A lot of people want to manufacture in Africa. A lot of people want to add the African narrative to their product, especially a lot of Black Americans. So they send me messages, they send the communities, messages that, so what do we have? We are the local producers. We want our products made in Africa because they make it with so much care, love, there's so much vibrance, there's so much story, but we haven't really met that demand yet. And this is the best time to actually key into that perception that is changing in the West about African products, key into it now and, drive it to a greater scale. And it takes an holistic approach because one person can't do it. When Dubai started tourism, we were seeing Dubai every time on CNN. As in, there's no way you won't go through any channel and not see Dubai. The government were literally actively promoting Dubai to people. So we can do our own, but from an holistic perspective, people need to know that African products are available, local products are available, and we can't do that individually. It has to be some sort of collaboration. So we also looked at that. And we looked at skills acquisition, how skills can be transferred, because right now we don't have enough people here to even transfer skills. We're like, okay, so maybe people can come in, teach the skills, and so skills can be transferred from in a cyclical manner. So let me give a perfect example. For instance, if you want to set up a studio or something, imagine there's a policy that says, if you train 50 or 100 artisans, for instance, or upskill them, you get some sort of incentive, maybe pension or whatnot. So these are the kind of structures that can encourage people to provide to produce more locally. So we looked at all that. We looked at legal structures.
Hi, Kemi.
Yes.
I am picking up the passion. And I honestly feel like you're touching on, so many key points that we need to touch on. I didn't mean to jump in, But
No,
just
it's
being
fine.
mindful of time
No problem.
as we're nearing
No,
1
that's it.
p.m.
Yeah. Thank you.
What I really liked about what you said is, focusing on our areas of strength and specialization, right? And leveraging them. So the services sector versus going and starting something new, which we can look to start building, right, over time. But for now, how do we build on what we have? And obviously skills comes into that as well, amongst the many topics that you mentioned. So thank you, Kemi. So sorry to cut you short.
No, it's fine. It's fine, thank you.
Okay, great. Wow, I feel like this was multiple conversations in one, and I'm sure people could create many research documents from this, and even use that info to inform policy papers. So thank you everybody for your contribution. I think something that Kemi also just mentioned was, government is a key enabler and plays a role. However, the private sector as well, right, has that role to play. And how do we come together to create the solutions that will move the creative sector forward? So thank you, Kemi, for that. I think that brings us to the end of our presentation of findings from the various moderators. And it also brings us to the part where we ask our partnerships director for Rome, Reshma Bamal Sharif, to please, do the closing remarks and next steps for us. Hi, Reshma, are you with us?
The bane of my existence, Amanda, the mute button.
We understand, Reshma. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Amanda. This was so exciting. I wish it could have gone on and on. There was so much energy and so much passion. I think it's a very, very important conversation, and it's the beginning, especially for Jobberman and MCF. This is not something that I think we're going to just do and park. But first, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for such an amazing and insightful event. I cannot say, I cannot express how much I enjoyed myself, and the passion and the commitment for growing the sector in Nigeria really came through. The contributions, the insights from today's discussion. It will definitely help us to continue our work with Mastercard Foundation's Young Africa Works program to empower and champion young Nigerians, and to specifically to excel in the creative sector, among the other sectors that we're also trying to work with. So we will work with today's learnings to further, to further drive our engagement with the creative sector and, of course, the youth. I don't think I can thank the panelists and the speakers and the moderators enough, because I have had an amazing learning session today. The collaborative nature of the event would not have been possible without such a creative brain, a brainstorm. So thank you for that. What great learnings. One key one, I think for me, is I've learned how popular the name Sheila is in Nigeria. It seems to be a favorite, thanks to Zoom, I guess. There were some key takeaways I'd like to share, just because I think there was so much effort. I think Chioma, thank you so much, program lead of MSME Finance, our Mastercard Foundation partner. I said, the project needs, the work we do needs to be scalable, impactful, systematic change needs to be brought in, and we need to be, and she used the word catalytic, and that I loved that. We need to monetize, democratize, and open the opportunities for our vulnerable youth. And what better way than in the creative sector? It gives a lot of openings for our vulnerable youth who are not in STEM but have the passion for creativity. Femi said writing the prosperity narrative is what this discussion is all about. And I love the question: are we ready for prosperity in this sector specifically? Odu, awesome moderator. Thank you for a great, impassioned, and very balanced conversation. And, there are so many things that I take away with this. And I really thank you for bringing out, how we need to be more competitive in the service economy. We need to accept the fact that it's more service than it is manufacturing. Look at the strenuous look at formal or quality skilling, and that the creative spirit is fueling the sector. That was amazing. How Promise mentioned flexibility and open-mindedness in the financial planning support, even though he came under fire. I appreciate you taking the fire, Promise. Ferdinand, you mentioned taking African stories globally, and that we should really start considering IP as a valuable collateral. I think that is a global conversation that needs to be had. And wow, moderators, Paul, Kehinde, Isioma, Kemi, thank you so very much. Thank you to the Jobberman MCF team for putting this together. And of course, we could not have done this without our partner, Microsoft, I'm so sorry, Mastercard Foundation. I don't know why Microsoft is on my mind. Maybe it's because it's a Word document. But going forward, the team will share the creative sector skills gap report and our plan on how we intend to continue to serve the sector. So again, thank you for joining us today. And a shout out to everyone for being here, and to the Mastercard Foundation, with whom, like I said, this project and certainly this roundtable would not have been possible. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. We hope to see you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Reshma.
Thank you, Reshma.
Closing out on a high note. And just as Reshma has just mentioned, sorry, that was supposed to be the last word, but we just wanted to make sure we kept our promise. We'll be dropping 2 links, the video and the report in the chat box for ease of reference for everyone. But yes, Reshma said it all, and thank you everybody for being here today. You can watch the video, and also the report is linked to our larger Jobberman reports portal, so you can see other reports that we have put on there. Thank you. Okay, great. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. Cheers. Please let us know once you've seen the links on the right. Okay, so the research report, or the creative sector skills gap report and sector reports link is there, and then the video will be dropped shortly. We hope you enjoy the video and the reports as much as we have. Keep well. And we'll also be sending this out via email as well.